Now, there are two other instances in the novel that I want to speak about, and one of them being the situation you found yourself in when you left your employment and the interaction you had with your former boss. Talk us through that interaction and tell, was it what you were expecting?
I was terrified, and I actually speak in that chapter. It wasn't the first time that I tried to revisit the practice to say my goodbyes. The first time I chickened out, I didn't even make it to the front door. And it was symbolic in a lot of ways of the process that I went through in many spheres of my life, because I was reclaiming a space that had always belonged to the factitious persona. That act that I had to put on, that was always what the space belonged to. And for me to walk through that door and ring the bell and say, this is who I am, and I'm stepping back into this space authentically and honestly, it was pretty daunting.
It sounds to me now, and it sounds in the book like it was quite a symbolic moment in your life and quite a turning point.
Well, it really was, and I think there's no shortage of turning points. This again comes back to that idea that there was no
defining
single
moment.
light bulb moment in Anastasia's journey. There's a lot of little ones along the way, and there's a lot of successes and victories and triumphs, and there's a lot of defeats and losses and hardships. But really, it was just about reclaiming the space and everything that came with it. So it was about asserting myself and saying, I'm not ashamed of who I am. I might not work here anymore, and those reasons might relate in some or other way to the process that I've gone through, but I'm stronger for it and I'm better for it.
Sitting here today, are you completely comfortable in your skin?
Yeah, I think so, except I've got a slightly snotty nose, which happens to the best of us.
I didn't even notice.
Well, I'm glad I'm doing a good job of, physician, heal thyself kind of thing. I don't know if I can ever say that I will be completely comfortable in my own skin. And I speak about dysphoria, and that's that feeling of incongruence between identity and anatomy in many senses. And dysphoria is a constant battle. I don't think there's anyone in this world who doesn't struggle to some or other degree with body issues. When you're trans, those issues manifest a little bit differently. But they do manifest, and sometimes they preoccupy us a lot more than they would your average cisgender person. I am much more comfortable than I have ever been. There are still moments when the vulnerabilities that I have and the weaknesses that I have lead to a lapse. But I think that's part of the journey.
Talk to me about being a medical doctor and going through the transition process. Did you feel like you could understand more of what was going on and what was going to happen because of your education?
It was a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, I'd done the research, and I'd learned about the treatment regimens and the surgical options and everything, risks, side effects, benefits, timelines, you name it. And I could understand that information. Obviously, I have access to different resources than the layperson would have.
It's not just Google for you.
Well, it's Google. I just click on different links because they make sense to me. I don't have to use Google Translate to get it from medicalese into English. That's kind of the difference. So that was very empowering for me. The other side of this coin is that it was frustrating for me to try and be a patient when a lot of the doctors that I interacted with had a much poorer understanding of trans identity and everything that goes with it, as well as the medical management thereof, than I did. And that was a difficult negotiation to have. And, you'll have noticed in the book, I express a lot of this frustration and this anguish, and I really experienced that dichotomy of simultaneously being the doctor and the patient. And it really made me reevaluate my relationship with medicine as a whole.
Talk to me about that misunderstanding of trans identity. What do you mean when you say that?
I touched a little bit earlier on the idea that not all trans narratives fit a predefined pattern. And there are some people who think that they do. And some of those people are doctors. So that can give you a little bit of context that if you don't go in with this very typical history of, well, when I was 2 years old, I was dressing up in mommy shoes and playing with my sister's Barbies. And, you know, the story I tell is I was asked at one point, did you play with your sister's Barbies as a child? And I said, I didn't have a sister. And the answer was kind of like, well, that's no excuse.
Yeah.
And that really just leads into this conditioning and the stereotyping of trans individuals. And it really undermines and invalidates our own unique identities and individuality. And that's where the problem comes in, when you're trying to treat a pattern instead of trying to interact with a human on a holistic level.